My daughter texted me, "We need distance. Stop contacting us completely." She did not know I was the one funding everything. When I replied, "I will cancel all my deposits first thing. Just letting you know." That was the moment the silence in my house changed shape. That message blinked on my phone just after 8 in the evening. No greeting, no explanation, just a verdict delivered in a single cold line. For a moment, I stood absolutely still, my hand hovering over the sink. I read it again, slowly, because disbelief has a strange way of softening edges before the pain settles in. My name is Elise Harden. I am 65. At my age, I thought I had already lived through the worst kinds of endings, losing my husband, rebuilding my life alone, watching friends move away or pass on. But nothing quite prepares you for a daughter deciding that you no longer belong in her world. Rowan has always been the sharp one, the bright one, the child who could turn a room toward her without trying. I used to think that was a kind of magic. Lately, it felt more like a warning I had been too stubborn to read. I stared at her sentence. The finality of it, the way it sliced clean through every memory we had ever shared. And in the middle of that stillness, something inside me did not break the way I expected. It froze, quiet and steady, as if bracing against a wind I had somehow known was coming. If she truly wanted distance, I could give her distance. Not the temporary kind people ask for in moments of anger, but the kind she had spelled out so clearly. Completely, my fingers moved on their own. "I will cancel all my deposits first thing," I typed. "Just letting you know." I did not add a question mark or an explanation. I did not ask why. There was nothing left to clarify. When the message sent, I placed the phone face down on the counter. The quiet around me felt different, as if the air itself had shifted. I was not sure yet what her words would cost her, or what mine would cost me. I only knew I would not chase someone who had already closed the door. And as I stood there in that new, heavy quiet, I realized I needed to finally look back at the years that had brought us to this moment. That was where the truth lived. Waiting. The morning after Rowan's message, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, growing cold between my hands. The quiet felt heavier than usual, like it wanted to remind me of every choice that had led us here. It started after my husband died. One winter night, a heart attack, and suddenly, I was a widow at 57. Sorting through hospital papers and condolences from people who barely knew him. Rowan moved back to Portland soon after, telling me she wanted to keep an eye on me. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But almost immediately, the requests began. "Mom, the car repair place needs $300 more than I expected. Can you cover it? Just this once." I had said, 2 months later, "Mom, Evan's job changed our pay cycle. Rent is tight. Can you help another yes?" Each time I agreed, the next request came faster, easier. Before long, Rowan increasingly expected I'd cover things without asking, and I realized I'd been enabling her habits. One night, she stopped by, tossed her purse on my couch, and said, "We had to put groceries on credit again. Can you spot us until next week?" There was no apology in her voice, no embarrassment, just expectation. Meanwhile, Portland changed around us. Prices climbed, neighborhoods shifted, familiar places turned into expensive shells of what they once were. Rowan said she couldn't keep up. Evan nodded along. And because I remembered what it felt like to be young and drowning in bills, I filled the gaps. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Rowan said once, arms around my shoulders. It should have comforted me, but something in her tone felt practiced. I handled each bill in order, often learning of new obligations only when they couldn't wait. I told myself it was temporary. They told me they'd get back on their feet. Years passed like that, one payment after another, each one tightening a rope I didn't notice until it pulled. Rowan never said thank you after the first year. And I kept pretending it didn't matter. But it did. And the weight of those years sat with me as I picked up my phone, knowing soon I'd have to unravel everything I'd silently built. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, small enough at first that I could pretend it wasn't there. One afternoon, Rowan showed up unannounced, dropped her keys on my counter, and said, "Evan and I need you to cover the internet bill this month. It's only $80, Mom. You know you're better at managing these things." There was no greeting, no softness. I opened my mouth to ask why, but she was already scrolling through her phone. "Waiting. I'll transfer it later," I said. She gave a quick nod, almost like approval, then added, "And the electric bill as well. Evan forgot this one, forgot." Her tone made it sound like forgetting was harmless. 2 weeks later, Evan came by alone. He hovered near the doorway like he didn't want to step inside. "Elise, the clinic messed up my insurance. There's a balance we can't handle right now." He pushed a folded paper toward me. $370, just until it clears. When I glanced at the bill, the date hit me first. It was from early spring. "Why am I seeing this now?" I asked. He shifted. "We didn't want to worry you." Rowan appeared behind him, arms crossed. "Mom, don't make this a big deal. Just help like you always do." Her voice had changed. Sharper, less daughter, more judge. A few days after that, we had dinner together at their apartment. Halfway through the meal, Rowan sighed loudly and said, "You know, you hover too much. Evan and I need space to handle things like adults." I stared at her. "I only step in when you ask." She laughed, a short, cold sound. "You always take things so personally." Evan kept his eyes on his plate. The rest of the evening passed in brittle silence. On the drive home, something in my chest felt tight, like the edges of a truth I wasn't ready to name. Pieces were shifting, lines were blurring, and the distance between us, once invisible, was beginning to show itself in every word we said. Rowan called on a Thursday evening, her voice bright in a way that always meant she wanted something. "Mom, great news," she said. "Evan and I found a new apartment. Bigger place, nicer building. We're ready to apply tonight. But we need the deposit. It's only $1,400. You can transfer it now." "Right." I held the phone closer, trying to steady my breath. "Rowan, I can't do that." She went silent for a beat. "What do you mean you can't? You always help. Not this time?" Her laugh came sharp. "Don't joke." "I'm not joking," I said quietly. Evan murmured, "Maybe she missed the number." Rowan repeated it slower, like I was hard of hearing. 1,400. We need it tonight." "I heard you," I said. "And I'm saying no." The shift was instant. "Wow," she said flatly. "So that's where we're at. You're really going to leave us hanging." "I'm not leaving you anywhere. I just can't keep covering everything." "You don't want to," she snapped. Evan finally spoke up. Louder this time. "Elise, we're trying to build a future here. Parents are supposed to support their kids. I've supported you for years." "That's not the point," Rowan shot back. "You know rent in this city is impossible. You know we're struggling. I know you're asking before trying anything else." I said, "There are options. Payment plans, assistance programs, budget changes." "Mom, stop. Just stop." Her voice trembled now. Part anger, part something colder. "You're being selfish. We're your family. We're supposed to be able to rely on you." "You can rely on me," I said softly. "But not like this." She exhaled hard, a long, disgusted sound. "Unbelievable. You picked the worst time to have a boundary." Evan muttered something under his breath. Rowan didn't hide her bitterness. "Don't bother coming by next week. I don't want this energy in our home." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, the quiet ringing louder than their voices ever had. Saying no shouldn't have felt like stepping off a cliff, but that night it did, and the fall had only just begun. 3 days passed without a word from Rowan. I told myself she needed space, that the anger would cool. I tried to keep busy laundry, small chores, anything that kept me from staring at my phone. The message came just after noon. We need to step back from communication for now. No greeting, no explanation, no softness I could cling to. I read it once, then again, waiting for something to make sense. My chest tightened the way it used to when I got bad news from the hospital years ago, quiet, suffocating, precise. A second message appeared. Don't call, don't show up. We'll reach out if we want to talk. I sat down slowly, the phone still warm in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. Shock has a way of emptying a room even when you're standing in it. I typed only one sentence. I understand. My thumb hovered for a second before I hit send. The moment the message left my screen, an odd stillness settled in like a door that had been dragging on its hinges for years finally clicked shut. I placed the phone face down on the table. The silence didn't rush in. It simply existed, as if it had been waiting its turn. And in that silence, something inside me shifted, not loudly, but with the certainty of something long overdue. That evening, I pulled out the drawer I rarely touched, the one stuffed with color-coded folders, old statements, and printed confirmations I kept just in case. The weight of it felt different now, heavier, almost alive. I carried everything to the dining table and sat down slowly, as if the past might shift if I moved too fast. I opened the first folder, housing. Dozens of receipts for rent transfers to Rowan's landlord, each one neatly labeled. I whispered the dates under my breath, realizing how many months I'd paid the entire amount without them contributing anything. Next came utilities, internet, insurance, medical copays. I sorted them into neat stacks the way I always did, but this time my hands trembled. 7 years. 7 years of small emergencies turning into habits. Habits turning into expectations. When I reached the tax documents, I almost closed the folder, but something inside pushed me to keep going. I unfolded Rowan's old income statement, the one she'd sent me 2 years ago, insisting she barely earned enough to cover groceries. A number caught my eye. I frowned, leaned closer, and read it again. Her listed yearly income was nearly double what she'd told me. My breath thinned. I grabbed the next year's document, same story. Higher pay. No mention of the pay cut she'd cried about over dinner that winter. No sign of the late checks she blamed on her employer. A lie. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mix-up. A choice. The door of memory cracked open just enough for me to see how many times Rowan had looked me in the eye and insisted she was drowning. How many times I'd carried the weight for her without knowing she had her own life preserver tucked behind her back. I set the papers down carefully, aligning the edges so they wouldn't bend. My pulse thudded in my ears, not from anger, but from a kind of clarity that left no room for denial. The truth didn't explode. It settled, quiet, heavy, exact, and for the first time, everything began to make sense in a way that hurt deeper than I expected. I woke before sunrise. The kind of waking that comes from a mind that never truly slept. The stacks of papers from the night before were still spread across my table. Quiet and undeniable, I sat down, took a steady breath, and opened the family group chat. My fingers didn't shake this time. I typed slowly, choosing each word with care. I'm honoring the distance you asked for. Before I step back, here is a summary of the payments I've been making on your behalf. I took pictures one by one: housing, utilities, medical bills, insurance, loan payments I had covered without ever being asked twice. 7 years of proof, every number spelled out, every date visible. Then I added, I will be ending my financial assistance next month. Please ensure all accounts and leases are in your names. For a moment, the screen stayed still. Then, the chat exploded. Rowan, what is this? Why would you send these Evan Elise? This feels manipulative. We trusted you. Rowan again. You promised to help. Now you're humiliating us. I stared at their messages, each one hitting the screen like small thrown stones. I typed, I didn't promise anything. I helped because I loved you. Seconds later, Rowan's next message arrived. We were upset, but this is cruel. You're weaponizing money. You're trying to punish us. Punish. The word stung. Not because it was true, but because she believed it. Evan chimed in again. If you pull out suddenly, we can't afford rent. We could lose the place. Then, Rowan, is that what you want, for us to lose everything? I closed my eyes, breathed in, and typed. You have stable income. The documents show that you can manage. A long pause followed, long enough for me to feel the shift in power, the ground tilting beneath their certainty. Then Rowan sent one final message. A frantic burst of letters. You're ruining our lives. I put the phone down gently. Their panic said more than any explanation they could have given me. It wasn't my absence they feared. It was the end of a foundation they never thought would move. The calls began less than an hour after I sent the message. First Rowan, then Evan, then Rowan again. Each call rang 5 or 6 times before sliding into silence. I didn't pick up. A new message appeared from Rowan. Mom. Answer. This isn't funny. I let the phone rest on the table. Another call came immediately, Evan this time. When I didn't answer, he texted, We need to talk. You can't just walk away from responsibilities you agreed to. I typed back. I never agreed. I helped. There's a difference. Seconds later, Rowan called again. I declined the call. She switched to voice messages, her voice shaking between anger and fear. Mom, please, just explain what you're doing. We can figure this out. Then another message, the tone snapping back to accusation. You're trying to hurt us. I don't understand why you do this. I set the phone aside, but it kept buzzing. Some relatives chimed in later, offering advice on what they thought I should do, Cousin Danielle. You're overreacting. Talk to them. Then Rowan's mother-in-law, a woman who barely spoke to me, sent a message dripping with judgment. You're putting Rowan and Evan in danger. A decent parent wouldn't. The phone buzzed again. Rowan's text this time was shorter, rawer. We can't afford next month's rent without you. I'm scared. It sat there on the screen, the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. Evan followed with, just help one more time. We'll sort everything out afterward. One more time. The same phrase they'd been using for 7 years. I placed the phone face down, letting the sound fade into the room. Their voices angry, panicked, pleading blended together until they all sounded the same. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because the money was gone. By the next morning, the panic in my phone had dulled into a steady hum of unread messages. I ignored all of them. I opened my laptop instead and logged into every account I had tied to Rowan and Evan over the years. The electric bill went first, then the internet, then the medical autopay I'd forgotten I set up one autumn when Rowan had pneumonia. Each cancellation came with a confirmation email. I read every one carefully, then removed my card numbers from the accounts. My hands didn't shake this time. They moved with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. Halfway through the process, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Rowan? I let it ring. A message followed. Please, don't do anything drastic. Just talk to me. I didn't reply. I opened the bank app instead and ended the recurring rent transfer. 7 years of payments, gone with one click. When the last account was finally cleared, I closed the laptop and stepped outside. The air felt colder than I expected, sharp enough to make my eyes water. I walked slowly toward the Willamette River, the place I always went when I needed to breathe. I stood near the railing, the sound of water low and steady beneath me. For a long moment, I didn't move. The weight I'd carried for years didn't vanish, it simply shifted. Settling into a space I could finally feel. My phone buzzed again. Another message. I didn't check it. I pressed my palms against the cold metal rail, letting the silence wrap itself around me. It didn't feel empty, not anymore. Cutting the last thread didn't bring relief the way I imagined. It brought something deeper, quieter, and unfamiliar. Freedom heavy in my hands and almost frightening in its honesty. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Dr. Priya in her small office, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. She listened as I explained everything: the messages, the cancellations, the quiet that followed. You're grieving a role you carried for a long time, she said gently. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped loving her. I know, I said, but I feel lighter. Good, she replied. That means you're finally choosing yourself. I didn't argue, I didn't apologize. I just breathed. At home, my days settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I cooked for one without guilt. I walked along the river in the mornings without checking my phone. I joined a pottery class I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. One evening, while shaping a small clay bowl, my instructor smiled and said, "You're steady. Most beginners tense up." I've been unlearning tension, I told her. It was the truest thing I'd said in a long time. When I got home, my phone buzzed with another message from Rowan Short. Uncertain. Not angry this time. I didn't open it right away. I set the phone aside, poured myself a glass of water, and let the peace of the room settle around me. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. If you're following my story, hit like, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. Now that nothing ties me down. What do I choose next?